I'm very excited to introduce Shane Green, co-founder and CEO of SGEi, who's going to be presenting on culture as a defining factor of brand success and a great customer experience. Shane, we're so excited for you to be here with us today. Couldn't have asked for a better wrap up to a day full of interesting topics and information, but I'm going to step out of the way and I am going to let you take the floor.
Great, Jonathan. Thanks so much. Thanks for having us a part of that. Well, let's talk about this whole idea of culture and how it impacts brand, customer experience. I'm the founder of SGEi. We're actually a customer consulting firm that came out of the hospitality space that has evolved from journey mapping what the customer does and really focusing on interactions, service, and experience into focusing on what culture and how employee experience is really the defining driver and brand and in customer experience success today. So I thought I'd just take you on a bit of a journey. It's the journey that we went, but it is also the evolution of our thinking and philosophy as we sort of got into this space. I think, again, going back a few years, but the reality is that everyone was about customer experience. They still are. Everyone wants to be the best in their industry. Everyone wants to sort of stand out. Yet the reality is for us, as we were involved with many different organizations, was that a lot of these organizations did not have sort of a plan. They didn't have a strategy in place to actually make this what they wanted or their vision a reality. So a lot of that started to sort of, think, well, how do you make that? And so we've been working on a customer experience strategy for, about 15, 16 years now. That's really fundamentally focused organizations around how do you deliver not only a great customer experience, but really define your brand. And as we always say, listen, brand is not just about a logo, it's about the overall experience. And I think that's really important. And so through all of our work, we've started to really, get a very clear picture that for us to create a great brand or deliver a great customer experience, you got to be talking about moments, what the customer values, and then the 4 elements that bring that value together in that moment, which is product, place, process, people. If you're there in the customer experience space, hospitality space, retail space, all the people that have been listening out there today, hopefully you've read or got involved with Daniel Kahneman's work. He's a psychologist that has such a sort of marked influence on experience. A lot of his work was around the idea of how humans create memories. And that's really important to understand that memories is a critical part of creating a loyal customer. We don't remember everything. We don't keep intact memories for every moment of our day. And I love this quote from him that humans relive their experiences, snapshots, not videos. And that sort of simple statement, if you take something away from the customer experience space, is that not every second and every touch point in a customer's journey is critical to them remembering you, to really create the type of imprint that makes them loyal, advocates, etc. So the key part for a lot of our work was understanding what are the key moments in the customer's journey that would really have an impact on them, that would really stand out in their mind. We've worked with the NBA on understanding a season ticket holder's moments. And while initially we thought that a season ticket holder for a basketball game, the moments would only be key within a season and it's about win-losses and how the team was doing, what we actually found is that the season ticket holder experience was a year-long element of many moments, many of which weren't actually involved from game to game, which means there was a lot of focus initially on trying to make sure everyone was satisfied every game. But what we learned is that for a season ticket holder, there were certain moments every season. I might have been taking my family, an important client, I was celebrating something. They were the games that defined the season for many fans. So it was important to start to learn about the fans and what was most important to them and when their most important moments were happening. They might have been celebrating an anniversary, a birthday, a graduation, and knowing when they were bringing the best client, that allowed us to focus in on key moments. We worked with BMW on the sales process. Again, buying a car was always, pretty sticky and people didn't really enjoy it. So we started to understand, well, what are the key moments? And there were 8 moments in the buying process that would determine whether or not that they felt that the sales process was great. The key one was what happened when they walked in their door. Instead of being tackled by the first salesperson, what most people really wanted was an opportunity to browse, glimpse, try, trying cars out. You go into a clothing store and what do you get to do? You get to try on lots of different clothes. Well, guess what? We found out that buying a car, people really innately wanted to do the same thing. They wanted to test drive cars. Well, for the salesperson, they didn't like that because it took them away from selling. If they spend all day with one customer who may or may not buy a car, test driving a bunch of different cars, that was seen as a really bad use of their time. So most salespeople would never encourage that idea of trying the car out. So for BMW, and again, they took the sort of a tip of the hat, I guess, to Apple. They put in place a BMW Genius, so that the first point of contact when you walk through the door was actually someone whose only job was to allow you to test drive and answer questions. So whatever your organization is out there, I think it's so critical that you understand there's key moments in the employees, in the customer's experience that you need to focus in on. And have you identified those? And then if you've identified them, do you understand the second part of the strategy, which is what does the customer want in that moment? We refer to a lot, Bain & Company's, the elements of the value pyramid. I think it's a few years old now. But it's been really important to understand for organizations that in any given one of those moments, what does your customer want from you? Do they want speed and efficiency? Do they want to be entertained? Do they want attention? Do they want status? Do they want safety? Do they want connectivity? All of those things as an organization, you've got to understand what it is that the customer wanted. I use my NBA example. The most important thing for a season ticket holder is they wanted to be able to touch and connect with players or the brand outside of the season. So we had to create moments, significant moments in the off season where the customer or the season ticket holder was still connected to their team in some meaningful way. Go back to the BMW, the car sales process. Again, we learned that the person wasn't walking through the door. In fact, while most people are scared to walk into a car dealership, is that they're going to get sold. In fact, we found most people want to be able to go into a car dealership and just try out and learn about cars. And there was a real gap between what they wanted and what they valued and what was being provided at the time. So I think it's very important that as an organization, you spend time understanding what is the emotional value that your customer seeks in that moment. And so if you understand the moment and then the value, then it's about delivery. And that's when you come to our 4 Ps. You must understand it's product, place, process, people. In that moment, one of these Ps play a part in delivering that emotional connection and that value. And so is it your product? Well, the reality is a lot of people are obsessed with their product. And by the way, companies should be. Their products or services is what makes them money. It's what defines them. But customers aren't quite as obsessed as you think they are. They're more focused on experience. They want to see the whole journey. It's not just about the product, it's the service, it's the interaction that comes around it. I often use the example of going to a great restaurant. Again, the restaurant or the chef is obsessed with their food. But for a person coming in, the food is an important part of it, but it's also about the ambiance. It's also about the service. It's also about the speed and the experience that they have with the people that they're with. So I think it's really important that sometimes we get too obsessed with our product or service and think that's it. When it comes to emotional experience, that may be something to think about. Again, BMW, listen, their tagline was the ultimate driving machine. It is one of the best cars out there, but they were so obsessed that they had the best car that maybe they forgot about the service style. So by introducing the Genius, there was a recognition from BMW that, again, we've got a great car, but we also have to have a great experience for our people coming into our dealerships. Place, for me, the place is where you do business. It could be on a website. It could be in a brick and mortar store. It could be in a field. It could be any places. We're able to do business anywhere that, again, a customer is. So then what you have to be able to do is think about the experience around that place. And most importantly, how do you enliven the senses? What does the customer smell? What do they touch, feel, see? What do they get to interact with? All of those things are important because as human beings, our knowledge, as the quote says, begins with our senses. We are very sensory. So we guide a lot of companies on the fact that you have to build the place around your product and service to again enliven the centers to meet the emotional value that the customer searches from you. Process, listen, again, we've worked across many different industries, and what we recognize is that the processes within the industry are mostly the same. But what we do hesitate, and we sort of suggest when you're dealing with a customer, be careful about becoming so obsessed with your process that you forget about the human element and put some personality and style into it. Or as Danny Meyer says, put some soul into it. So again, process, don't think, unless you've introduced some new technology, get so caught up that you have a process that no one else has. When we see companies across many industries, we'd argue that 90% of all the processes are exactly the same. And so that takes us to our people. And this is where we started to have aha moment, because as we were doing a lot of this customer experience strategy, we realized it was the people strategy that was letting most organizations down. And what we have to understand is we get so obsessed with our product, our processes, we make everything look cool. I mean, think about it over the last 10 years, all the shops you walk into are so damn cool. They feel, they bring your senses to life. Only be disappointed by the person you're interacting with, whether it's in the retail, hospitality, restaurant, all of those spaces, it's the people. And I love this quote, Blake Morgan, she's fantastic. And she says, your customer experiences tells you everything you need to know about what's under the hood. Well, if you haven't worked out already, what's under your hood is your people, and more specifically, your culture. I work with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, and every time, when I became a manager at the Ritz-Carlton, we're often told that it's about the attitude of our people that matter more than anything else. Ritz-Carlton hotels are gorgeous, have some of the best processes in hospitality. We have a true sensory experience. But again, if you ask what makes a Ritz-Carlton or any other luxury sort of hospitality experience stand out, it's the people. And so every day, this is a hospitality axiom. Every day, though, we would talk about this one simple idea: a person with a great attitude delivers great service, a person with a bad attitude delivers poor service. Again, I don't need to tell you, you walked in as all customers, you go into a store, a restaurant, a hotel, anywhere, and if the person that is taking care of you has a crappy attitude, it's just naturally bad service, no matter how good the product or service is, how good the place is, and how great the process is. So we were obsessed with this idea of attitude. And what I sort of realized is that, this idea of attitude is a direct reflection of their experience of work. Now, I know this is not 100% of the time, because things happen outside of work that impact how people feel. I get it. But the most important thing I think that we've got to continue to think about and evolve is that when an employee experiences work, when they feel unsafe, disrespected, not cared for, not part of a team, why are we so surprised that they have a bad attitude? Why are we surprised when they don't take care of a customer or perform at their best or want to stay with us long term? It's amazing to me. If organizations don't take care of their people, how do we expect them to take care of our customers? And that's the piece that I think we have to accept so much more responsibility. And thankfully, I think we are. But there's still too many organizations out there, particularly even ones in the hospitality, in the retail, where they're so obsessed with their thing that they forget about the people that have to deliver that thing. And so that's where a lot of the work that we've done over the last year is about workplace culture, because all that culture is, and it's an outcome, is the collective attitudes, feelings of a group of people. In fact, the question is not, do you have a culture? The question should always be, when you have a group of people together, what is your culture? Whether it's your family, a sports team, a community, church, or obviously what happens at work. You have a culture. And the question that we ask and we start to think about is, what is the collective attitude? Now, the word I want to put out there is collective. I think that's so important. Some people will have a bad day. Some people will be off. So that's fine. Don't think just because one person makes a mistake, someone has a bad attitude one day, that the culture is wrong. Again, things happen outside of work. But if you have more than one, more than two, the more of your people with a bad attitude, having that bad attitude on more than one day, and in fact, it goes into weeks and months, you have a culture problem. And you start to think about, how do I start to shift these collective attitudes? And that's why I think when it comes down to, when I started with the idea of the customer experience and the ultimate outcome being brand, I think it's important. And the former Tony Hsieh with Zappos says, brand is just a lagging indicator of your culture today. Why is that? Because I think so much in today's world is built on the interaction with people. You go onto social media communities, you hear what customers are talking about online. They talk about the people more than anything else. So just like Blake said, customer experience tells you everything about what's under the hood. I have a great customer experience. Guess what? They're the same companies that have a great employee experience. The employee experience is what creates the culture. Culture is created as the result of your employees' experience of work, how they feel during critical moments when interacting with their manager, or the mechanisms around them each day impacts that feeling. And so we've been working a lot over probably the last 5-7 years about employee experience strategy. More than anything else, we've been really focused in on this one area because we believe it was the area that most companies were failing at when it comes to their brand. And so just like we have a customer experience strategy to create brand, we have an employee experience strategy to create great culture. And it's about the 3 M's: moments, mechanisms, and managers. You've got to have those great moments, just like I talked about before with the customer. We've identified about 39 key moments in the employee's journey from before they even start during the recruitment process all the way to when they're leaving on their last day that matter to them. Whether it's a day, we've got 8 or 9 key moments every day, to each year, whether it's recognizing a birthday or anniversary. These moments stand out in your employee's mind and they dictate how that memory is formed about the place they work at. If the memory formed makes them feel good, makes them smile. And again, that doesn't mean they don't have bad days, but for the most part, on most days, they feel good about what they do and who they do it for. Guess what? That's a good culture. And so those moments are absolutely critical. Mechanisms. The one thing that I always sort of talk about is to understand that the mechanisms, whether it's from your recruitment, orientation, onboarding, recognition, communication, there's all these mechanisms that companies put huge investment in. $300 billion will be spent this year in the employee experience space on mechanisms. So your company is going to put a lot of money into stuff like training and recognition. And yet many times when we go in, unfortunately, we find that you don't get the outcome you're seeking. We've seen a large organization, huge, 80,000 people, put a recognition program in. Again, they put a digital platform in, making it very easy for managers and employees to recognize other people. You can kind of go in, put a comment, very social media savvy, send them a badge, send them a certificate, send them a high five. We've seen in a lot of organizations these recognition platforms that are now in place. And by the way, they're great. But in this situation, when we got involved, what was happening is that the rollout of this recognition platform completely went against the intent and the emotional outcome of recognition. Why? Well, here's a couple of things that happened. The first thing they did was they said it was mandatory that every manager must recognize at least 4 employees a month. Sounds fair enough, kind of to create a habit. Well, what managers ended up doing when we started to look into it is about 40% of the managers were doing recognition on the last 1 or 2 days of the month, which means they forgot about it through the whole month, and then all of a sudden, because they had to do it, they sort of would quickly do it at the end. Now, what happened was employees found out about this, as they always do. So all of a sudden, recognition went from something that you do spontaneously with meaning and relevancy to something that you had to do. So that didn't work. Then when we started to look at it, because managers were doing it so quickly, what happened was they were just going, good job, well done. And again, that they classified as their recognition, failing to tell the employee why they were recognized. So again, removing meaning from it. And then the final thing that happened was when we spoke to employees, they had a hard time understanding, why does my manager recognize me on a platform when there are 2 desks over, they could just get up, come over and say thank you. So again, we lost that emotional connection. So that's why I talk about mechanisms a lot. And I said, sometimes you got to make sure they have the right emotional intent. And then managers, again, how well they inspire hearts and minds. And as I sort of said here, that emotional intent is absolutely crucial, because that's what, for a great brand, you create with the customers, and that's what a great culture does. It creates an emotional connection. And the biggest thing that you kind of hear a lot of is that these managers and their impact that they can have on how someone's feel each day is tremendous. And so it's their ability to respect and listen and talk to that really stands out and has a huge opportunity with an employee. So a lot of what our work has been doing in the last few years is helping organizations develop a better employee experience strategy, kind of get to a better culture. And I kind of wanted to sort of finish up today by just giving you, if you're listening out there and you're thinking about, well, how do I do this as we approach. And a lot of our workplace sort of experiences have been upended because of the pandemic and everything. How do I approach this? So we guide a lot of organizations, and there's 5 simple steps. First one, create a vision. Well, what sort of culture do you want? Just like you have an idea of what sort of brand you want, you create a brand mission statement and vision statement. Create what type of culture do you want? Make that your North Star. Make sure you understand what it is that you're trying to create. As I've already mentioned before, identify the moments that matter most. Listen, you could sit down and go, all right, what are the moments that matter most? We've been mapping this for over 10 years. As I said, we've got about 39 moments, but just go talk to your employees. That's all we did. We went and asked employees, hey, what are the moments that matter most every day when you come to work, or every week, or every month? What are the most important moments to you throughout the year? Whether it's a manager recognizing them on their birthday, the annual performance review, big moment. Again, so many times that disappoints. But again, if you sat down, I'm sure many of those moments would come to task. And then once you've identified the moments, you go, is it a mechanism thing or a manager thing? Is it a mechanism that's influencing it, or is it the manager? Sometimes it may be both. But start to look at your mechanisms and go, are these mechanisms delivering an emotional impact? One of the mechanisms is orientation. We class it as the first 1 or 2 days that an employee joins on the job. What we find is fascinating is that in recent years, half of all people that leave a job every year do so in the first 60 to 65 days. Why? Well, whether through the recruitment process or the first few days on the job, they realize that this could be a career or just a job. And it's really important to understand that, because if it's just a job, guess what? They keep looking for their next job and they're going to quickly leave you. Why? Because they didn't get emotionally connected. They don't feel that emotional connection. So an orientation is very important. An employee's first day, do you make them feel welcome? Do you explain the priorities of the job? I was fortunate to work with a gentleman called Horst Schulze with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, who would drum it into us as managers and say, an employee's first day of the job is so critical because it's one of the few days in their life where they're open to change. So an employee comes in for the first sort of day, and their question and their moment is, do I have to change to be successful? Most times in most companies, the answer is no, because they come in and they go through paperwork and they go through rules and they go through how to work and they go, oh, this is just another job. Versus coming in and understanding the importance of customer, brand, and culture and what they stand for and our purpose and our why. That makes people change. So I challenge you to think about your mechanisms. Listen, manager, we talked about what leadership habits define to be a successful leader today. What are the things that you ask your managers to do? You might have a lot of managers with titles, but that doesn't mean they're a leader. A leader is someone who inspires hearts and minds. A manager for us is someone that focuses on accuracy, safety, efficiency. They really focus on tasks and things. They focus on the operation, whereas leaders focus on people. Now, they're two sides of the same coin. You have to have management skills to run the business, and you have to have leadership skills to manage a group of people, to manage a team. So it's really important to ask yourself, I know I've got lots of managers, people with titles that are responsible for my employees, but what are my leadership expectations? What do I expect from them as it pertains to how they take care of people? And how do I measure that? And how do I account for that? And how do I manage their performance around that? So it's very important for us that we establish clear expectations and habits about what you expect from the leader. And then it's sort of finally, as anything, you got to implement. Our sort of famous Aesop sort of quote, often when all is said and done, often is more said than done. So again, you can talk about this, but you actually have to implement it to actually get things done. So for us, as we sort of start to wrap this up, we spent the last few years, I wrote the book Culture Hacker, really about understanding mechanisms, the 3 M's of EX strategy, to help sort of really define the employee experience strategy that I've talked about, and sort of leadership. All of these come together to ultimately support your customer experience and brand. And as I sort of said in the beginning, it's our experience, what we've found over the years, that this is the one area that we're least focused on. And if we are focused on it, we often leave it up to the HR team. One of the first quotes I put into my book is that you have to remember, as a business person, culture is no longer an HR thing, it is a business thing. I believe it's the most important thing in business. It's certainly one of the most important things that will define your customer experience, which ultimately for me, in today's very transparent, social media driven world, is how your brand will be known. So keeping culture in mind, hopefully you've got a few ideas there. Appreciate sort of being able to sort of share some of those ideas certainly with you today. and sort of appreciate Jonathan and the team kind of to get me out here.